Where in DC can you see world-class artists for free? The Library of Congress. They have presented live music in one of the city's most iconic spaces for more than 100 years. Join them for more than 25 concerts and events, from classical music to jazz, Broadway, popular music, and more. Tickets are available now at loc.gov/concerts. See a show that's sold out? Don't sweat it. The library offers day of rush passes to all performances. See what's coming up at loc.gov/concerts.
Today on CityCast DC, we're talking about plowmaggedon. The city is up in arms about icy streets and blocked-off alleys. We're talking about the looming cuts at the Washington Post and what they mean for hometown DC. And we're talking about an appalling apartment building in Chinatown and what it says about DC's ability to enforce its own rules. Plus, in a members-only fourth segment, the comeback campaigns of two very, very long-time local politicians. Junaid Deal of Axios and Julia Caron from CityCast are here. Today is Friday, January 30th. I'm Michael Schaefer. Here's what DC's talking about. Hey, Junaid.
Hey, y'all. Good morning.
Hi, Julia.
Hey, Mike.
Happily, it appears we're all taping this from the comfort of your homes. But DC's residents are increasingly irritated by the fact that there's nowhere to park and it's very hard to get out of your own driveway and so on. There's a counter argument that, well, no one can really plan for 4 inches of ice or whatever it was that fell. This is not sort of your normal snow. But Junaid, you wrote about this, the no-show snow plows. How do you adjudicate it?
Well, like the big problem is, I thought, and a lot of people pointed this out, was the communication that was lacking from DC government. It's one thing that, you get ice, you get sleet, you get what they're calling now snowcrete, is what
what a name.
I also, I don't know how common of a word this is.
What does it mean? I'm sorry, I've not heard it. Yeah,
right. It's like snowcrete. It's like the snow is so hardened. It's like concrete. Get it?
Okay.
It's like, but they're calling it this, DC government is, because they're like, first you had the snow and then you had 4 inches plus of ice that fell on top of it. It's really, it turned into this hardened ice that actually broke down some of the city's plows. So look, the challenges were immense. I get it. I think a lot of people were frustrated that things weren't being communicated effectively. The fact that some of these plows were broken, we didn't know until some of the council members who had talked to agency crews were coming out and saying that. It wasn't coming from the mayor directly until much later. I think that's one of the problems, right? If you could just clearly be communicated the status of a cleanup effort or of a plowing effort, that's one thing that at least people can appreciate and understand that. But it seemed like the city was lacking in just telling people what's up.
Why do you think that is?
I think they were flat-footed. It seemed like they were flat-footed. Anyone who was just looking at the weather forecast would see that it was going to be freezing temps for days after the snow. Anyone who's going to shovel their sidewalk or their front yard knows what that means. You got to shovel early. And it seemed like, that's the time when you think about, okay, who should I contract out with if this stuff really freezes over? I need those bobcats or that construction equipment, which is what DC ended up saying they did on Wednesday, days after, because they needed those construction vehicles to break up the ice and haul it. So they seemed a little flat-footed, honestly. And the mayor, who's not running for another term, said that she was going to run through the tape and this was not going to be just, implying she was going to make this lame duck period, just like any other time in her mayoralty. But it didn't seem that way. It seemed like a a flat-footed sort of effort by someone who's not going to run for another term.
So what would a more engaged, I don't know if Julia, if you have thoughts, what would a more engaged, under this theory that she was flat-footed and was not, running through the tape, what would a more engaged mayor have been doing?
So I'm the daughter of a guy who grew up in Rochester and a mom who is from the Boston area. Every time it snows here in DC, it feels there are vibes that they are underprepared or unprepared. I know that they salted the roads and they got some plowing done while there wasn't ice there. Hell yeah. Porter Street, down near where I lived, that's pretty good. Looks like 2 lanes of traffic were ready to go. There's a citizen, like a snow team tracker for areas where like the streets are plowed. And they have this cool little integrated map where it says like serviced within the last 4 to 8 hours, serviced within the last 8 to 12. Junate, per your reports, citizens are pissed because it's kind of inaccurate, right?
Yeah, there's this online live map that apparently it's supposed to show when the plows have passed through streets, but it's misleading. The map will say that the plows went down so-and-so street like 4 to 6 hours ago. And then you can look outside if you live there and you see there's still nothing cleared out. So the city, their map is wrong. That was frustrating people. That thing's been wrong for years. They brought it out, I think, 4 years ago, and it was wrong then. It doesn't really make sense why they have it. Apparently, if a plow passes your street, even without actually like shoveling, like clearing out snow, it'll say it was plowed, which defeats the purpose.
Right. So my issue with this is like having the plows is one thing and they're good and ready to go, but you actually have to like do the plowing alongside and not just say like it passed by this street even when it's inaccurate. I think that's what people are mad about, and what I'm particularly mad about, because I know that they have the plows. I've seen the photos. So what irritates me is like saying something is plowed and then it being patently like not plowed.
Yeah, 100%. I think Metro did a much better job, by the way.
So Metro had this whole thing online where basically what ended up happening was they essentially like have this thing called a fire snake that runs along the rail lines and basically unfreezes the rails from like the exterior shell. They like have a cool photo of it. It's sick. That said, like their buses couldn't run still. Even with the plowing that did happen, like there are multiple videos of buses trying to go around corners and getting stuck. Side streets still not being plowed. Like it's a whole thing. I
gotta say, I was waiting for the bus a couple times this week, and it was a ghost bus situation. The bus that was supposed to be coming didn't come. The app said it was there, and there was no bus. And I got to imagine that that there's also a problem that a lot of the drivers cannot get to work. So, I think one of the things that occurs to me this week is this sort of, we have a sort of divided city in DC where there's a lot of folks who live in a city where you really don't need to have a car. You're very close to transit. You're conveniently located to walk to most of the things you need in your life. And the thinking in that way is, well, we're happy. We don't have to live in the suburbs where you get snowed in, and things shouldn't have to close because you can walk to school, you can take the metro, etc. And a big and sort of unusual, because of the ice, snowstorm like this, I think reminds people, or ought to remind people, particularly people running for office, of how much of the city actually don't live in that situation, actually live in a much more typically American sort of quasi-suburban, car-dependent situation, like it or not, and really are inconvenienced, and require streets to be relatively clear, but can't just adjust. So that's a perspective I think that sometimes gets underplayed, but it certainly comes out on weeks like this.
If I'm one of these people running for mayor, if I'm like a Janice Lewis George, if I'm a Kenyon McDuffie, I'm coming out and I'm walking on the ice and I'm saying, hey, do you want this to not happen again? Vote for me. Kenyon McDuffie's already trying to come up with a snow strike force because this has been so bad. Like, he says he doesn't want this to happen again.
Well, Janae, one of the things I was surprised about was this statement that they're not going to enforce you got to shovel your sidewalk ticketing, which just seems to me, and I get that like if you haven't shoveled it yet, you're in some trouble. Although I did find myself that using like metal gardening shovels works pretty good for breaking the stuff up. Um, but I don't know. It just seems to me like shoveling your sidewalk is like part of living in a civilized society.
Yes, for people who weren't, and they did bring this fine out like a couple years ago, I think, right? But they are waiving it temporarily for businesses. Nearly 200 businesses were supposed to get fined for not shoveling their sidewalk. This is what the mayor said. The context is important because some of the questions she was getting at the press conference Wednesday were about the communication issues and all that. And she said, if you feel people are frustrated now, give them a ticket for snowcrete they can't remove, is what the mayor said. So they are suspending it because I guess the logic is that this is so tough to remove. We're not gonna, fine people. It's a little different for businesses and apartment buildings that are not clearing their sidewalks. I think they need to be held to a higher standard, especially like if you're a bank. Like people were emailing us that like so-and-so bank on a major intersection was like completely unshoveled. I mean, like, that's just...
Don't hold back. Which bank is that?
I don't remember which one it was. I don't want to get debanked.
Well, I don't. Maybe I see it different because, like, if you're home, you're home. But if it's a business and the business is closed and no one's coming to work, I feel like that's a little more of an excuse.
Well, here's the other thing. The people were calling what the mayor's office was advertising as the Snow Heroes Volunteer Task Force.
They had people like help neighbors out and dig people out of the snow. That's actually a good thing.
They had 600 people sign up or something, but I had people email us and were like, well, we called and we tried to get in touch and no one would come back and answer us. And like, this is like a elderly person who needs to get out of their home and can't shovel. So I don't... like how much volunteer help is actually being effective here.
Well, right. And having to organize it like that seems, I mean, is it just like shoveling out your neighbor who has mobility issues? Isn't
that's what you hope, like, right?
Part of the price of living in a normal society.
To be clear, I said that on Tuesday's roundup. I was like, if you you can forego the gym for one day. You know what's a good replacement for weightlifting in this weather? Lifting ice. If you haven't tried it, you're going to get a workout in. I promise you.
But before we slide on to a new subject, sorry, Janae, what happens now? Is there any sort of killer new piece of equipment or flamethrower or something that they're gonna bring in to ameliorate this? Because the forecast is icy for a long time, even if it looks like we're not going to have the initially forecast snowstorm this weekend, and the frustration will only be like literally this morning. We got something wrong with our oven. If anyone wants to volunteer, and I called the appliance guy, and his first question was like, "Is there any parking?" And I said no, and he said, "Well, I don't think I can do that," which is a drag for me because I'll have to keep cooking food in the toaster oven all weekend. But like, it's a real drag for him because that's money he's not earning.
Yeah, no, like I don't know if they can bring a flamethrower out and melt the snow.
But have they talked about like a next step besides trying to dragoon citizens into being good neighbors?
I think they're just going to keep with the construction vehicles they've got. They're hauling this ice back to RFK Stadium's parking lot, which apparently has a 2 football stadium size snow pile.
It's like a mountain.
Now.
It's awesome. If you haven't seen photos, go see the photos.
But I think they don't have some magical equipment here, so we're gonna get more snow. It seems maybe 4 inches more possibly, and I think just hoping for the sun to help out the city. But there's no big silver bullet here.
All right, so let's go from Plowmageddon to Post-Mageddon.
How many Mageddons in this episode, Mike? So many.
This is a Mageddon-y period in our history.
Great.
So here's the news, that there have been a lot of reports, and anyone who's in journalism has heard from their friends, a lot of rumors that the Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, will, as soon as next week, engage in a massive layoff in order to try to stanch what are apparently pretty substantial losses. And that this layoff, according to a lot of the reports and according to what I'm hearing, is going to hit most strongly in international coverage, sports, which may go away entirely, and metro. For those of us, for all of us three, and anyone in DC journalism, it is an awkward story because on one hand, we are in sort of a somewhat competitive position because reporters, journalists compete with each other. On the other hand, anybody who's in local journalism also leans very, very heavily on the Washington Post, as do citizens rely very, very heavily on the Washington Post because until now, the city has been a remarkably well-covered city. The Post's metro coverage was obviously has shrunk, as has all American newspapers, is, I suspect, the envy of most big city newspapers in the country. And I don't know what percentage of all stories that are on local TV news or radio or CityCast begin with reporting at the Post. But it's a very high number. We have a lot of really smart and talented Post reporters on our pod. And I don't just mean like City Hall news, because I think of local DC as also like the federal workforce or K Street as a business or the culture, the Kennedy Center. So no one's sure what's going to happen next week, but the potential for a real change in how the local Washington works and thinks is imminent, and it makes me terribly sad to think about.
Yeah, this is something that's kind of personal and close to home. I'm a former Washington Post high school sports reporter. That was my first job out of graduate school.
Yeah, you're retroactively fired.
I'm retroactively let go, even though I was part-time. But I can tell you that high school sports in the area, if you were a preps reporter at the sports desk, that was your launching pad to maybe get the Nationals beat or the Caps beat. A bunch of the preps reporters were if I do a really, really good job here, I can cover one of those major league teams. And when you think about some of the people that the Post sports desk, even in the opinion section, has produced, think of your Tony Kornheisers, think of your Michael Wilbons, think of your Sally Jenkins, your Christine Brennans. Pound for pound, those are some heavy hitters in sports writer world. And I know that that's a very specific niche. But I think that page totally punched above its weight. And it is wild to me that the one thing that a lot of high schoolers in the area look forward to is all Mets. That's the whole thing. And that's just gonna disappear.
Right.
It's really sad.
And so as a business matter, they say they want to be the paper for the whole country, or the whole world, the whole English-speaking world. And
which is crazy, but
we know that whether or not it's a good idea, that's the plan. And we also know that most people in the English-speaking world don't care about the Kenyon McDuffie mayoral campaign or the Washington Wizards or what's playing at the Studio Theater. We do, though, because we live here. And I think, with sports, I think sports fanhood has changed in pretty significant ways that make it harder to do coverage based on one geographical area. But but just looking at it from the sort of selfish perspective of I live here and I want to live in the best possible city. What that coverage that you does, the local high school sports or the beloved local team, that effectively helps knit us closer together as a community. And when that goes away, we lose something much more, important from a lives are in the balance point of view is rigorous coverage of local government, local crime, local business and power, and that has been a thing. That's another thing that's apparently on the chopping block.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tragedy, and I don't understand what the new leadership that began leading the Post, I think 2 years ago now, CEO Will Lewis. It's really unclear what their plan here is, because this is, I think, their second round of big layoffs, right? if you look back at the Post when Bezos bought it, his vision was to take it from what the Graham family had done, which is they were going to have a paper for the Beltway about the Beltway, and to turn it into this thing that was going to be worldwide and compete with the New York Times. And they did succeed at competing with the Times, and maybe even were ahead of them a little bit during the first Trump era. But it never seemed like they were actually building the foundation to go toe to toe as a business, to actually be a worldwide juggernaut. And just as they were chasing that scale, I think the media business, I think the future was moving out under them, because suddenly you had niche news outlets that came out, like Punchbowl News, which covers the hell out of Capitol Hill very well, like Puck, that covers sort of the elite power tech Hollywood scenes. They started to be the new hot sort of thing in media, whereas the Post was still chasing this worldwide ambition of scale, something that the Times has mastered very well, but how many times can you have? And just as the ground was shifting, they did not pivot, and they are now left in a situation where it would be great if they had like a punch bowl inside of the New Washington Post,
Right.
but they don't.
But for those of us who live here, though, what would be really great would be, I mean, what I think what is going to be hard to replicate is sort of stuff aimed at like normies.
Well, that's the thing. I mean,
like who got mugged in my neighborhood last night.
I think a possible plan here is actually contrarian to go back to the vision that the Graham family had, which is building a product that distinctively serves the Washington region, which is not what they do anymore. You have to be for and about something, and I think the Post is trying to be everything from someone in Tulsa to Tokyo, and that's not really a model that's working.
Right. There's this fabulous graph that Nate Silver posted. I don't know if you guys have seen this, about it running head-to-head directly in competition against the New York Times. And it plots it from when Bezos purchases it in the middle of 2013-14. And it shades for like the Trump areas for when he's in office. When Trump is in office the first time around, the Post is like hitting totally above its weight. It's beating the New York Times. Both of them take a downturn after he leaves office. And then when he's elected again, the Post just like completely craters, and the New York Times like skyrockets. And it's wild.
A lot of anger at Bezos over the perceived sucking up to Trump. But look, can we just like bring it down out of like media business for a sec to, Janae, you cover City Hall. How do you think the place changes if the number of reporters chasing those scoundrels around and the platform on which they could expose their incompetences, if that gets reduced, like what?
Yeah, it's bad for voters. It's bad for the media reporters like us who compete with them. It's bad for the region. They still produce the kind of work that a paper of record has to do for a region. They cover comprehensively stories that other places don't have the resources or reporting to do. And so you take a big hit, and it takes a hit in terms of the stories they cover are not just about like the City Hall or whatever. Stories like they just scooped that the federal government's about to sell the old post office building, once home to Trump Hotel. So metro stories have a lot of salience, not just locally as well. And especially in an era when like local DC could not matter even more, perhaps, because, like we would love it if, every corner of DC was covered. But especially now with the Trump administration, it's such a unique dynamic. Well, yeah, with the election, but the Trump administration is intervening with the city at an unprecedented level, which I think makes for a lot of news.
So just before we bounce, without any certainty, people are looking at tea leaves. Among the tea leaves is they initially said we're not going to send anyone to the Olympics. The Olympics begin right at the time when the layoffs are supposedly happening, and so that tracked with the idea of ending a sports desk. They then sort of backtracked and said, well, we'll send 4 instead of 12. They've baseball writers aren't going to spring training, and they've told at least the basketball team they're not going to be sending someone on the road with them. So these are all the kind of, and meanwhile, a lot of staffers are sending appeals to Bezos and even to Bezos's wife, who's a former journalist, saying like, "Don't do this," and kind of calling on the sort of hosannas of the high church of journalism. I don't know. Again, read into those tea leaves and those appeals what you will, but I guess there's going to be big news rather soon. Speaking of sort of small bore outrages that are maybe not interesting to people beyond the Beltway, but are really important to us here, there was a pretty amazing story I saw written up in the Post about this building, a 10-story building in Chinatown or near Chinatown, mostly occupied by seniors, where the elevators have not been working for 6 weeks. A month ago, a judge gave the landlords 24 hours to fix them. They have not been fixed in that month. And activists say this is landlords trying to basically force these lower income people out in order, because the neighborhood's kind of hot, they can turn it around and make it a attractive place for rich people. We get pitched from time to time a lot of like bad landlord kind of stories. This one seems like particularly outrageous, and also the sort of thing. I mean, there, like in this case, there's not like a lot of debate about whether this is supposed to be happening or not. Like this is a clear, against the rules, and yet it seems like our local city is not able to make these residents whole.
Yeah, I mean, this is particularly egregious. I know, like, the Department of Buildings in DC has a Department of Buildings, if you didn't know, had issued this company that owns this building. It's called Bush Company. It's basically infraction notices about, giving them 60 days to make one elevator operational. They've got 5 elevators in that building. So you got 60 days, make one of them operational. Since November, this stat to me just like was bananas and stuck out. Department of Buildings has inspected the building 7 times and issued the building's owners $28,813 in fines. The records show that the building received violation notices for having all of its elevators out of service 6 times between November 5th and January 20th. To me, that feels like it takes a lot of effort to, like, between November and January, not have one elevator fixed. One? Bananas.
Janae, how does this intersect with the way the city's governed? I mean, there's as Julia said, there's a process there. Typically, when agencies fall down on the job and people, particularly vulnerable people, are not protected, there's members of the city council speak up in their kind of watchdog capacity. What happened here?
Well, look, I don't actually know a whole lot about this story, and it's kind of wild to hear about it, but we're in a mayoral election year. So these are the stories that a mayoral candidate would be, beating the drum about. And if you're a voter, this is the kind of stuff you want them to talk about. They have some incentive to talk about it more than usual. We always hope politicians will do what's right, but at the same time, a lot of times they need some personal ambition lined up with the thing they're going to be pushing for. So if someone's ambitious to be mayor, you might find them more eager to listen to your problems. I'm curious to learn more. How big is this apartment building, and why is there elevators all just stuck in? Is it just neglect to get people out? I don't know anything.
Another piece of news, sort of in similar vein. In the last week, there was hearings in the DC Council about allegedly appalling conditions at St. Elizabeth's, the psychiatric hospital, where people testified, nurses testified about frequent assaults, violence, heating systems that are so lousy that you have to wear a winter coat inside. And again, this was, look, this was not exposed by like a feat of reporting. This was the local legislature acting in its watchdog oversight capacity. But the common denominator with this and the apartment building is there are regulations in place that are supposed to protect like really vulnerable people who can't protect themselves. Is this city government, which has had an awful lot on its plate, and where these kinds of things are not like a sexy issue, are they on the job on that?
Yeah, they need the enforcement, and sometimes it does take an elected official to hold a press conference, bang the drum, do something flashy to get attention and make those agency heads do the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, like if I'm the rep for that building, Museum Square in Mount Vernon Triangle, the fact that like all of your elevators are out, if I'm like the rep, I go into the building and I show people, hey, I have to walk up 10 flights of stairs and there are people like in wheelchairs who can't leave their apartments. Like that's just unacceptable, right? Like,
oh, also the fire alarm system seems not to work either.
Oh, great. So if you're caught in the fire, not only can you not actually leave, it doesn't even alert you. So
well, there's this wrinkle where like because during a fire you're not supposed to use the elevator. It is not treated like an essential piece of safety equipment.
But one of the things that I find really interesting about like all of this is this unit, Museum Square, it's got 302 units. I think, Jeanette, you were asking how many units it's got.
Yeah, it's 10 stories I just saw.
Yeah. It used to be that most of them were occupied. Today, all but about 50 are empty. So only like 50 potential units are filled out of 302.
I don't know, man. If I'm a judge and I give someone 24 hours to fix an elevator and they don't fix it in a month, aren't you supposed to like, they put reporters in jail for not giving up their sources. Isn't this a thing where you're supposed to say like, this is contempt and you can think about it behind bars?
Well, now that the people who could replace the elevator parts have to drive through Snowcrete, maybe they have a good excuse. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe that plays in their favor. But like, yeah, like there has to be some flavor of an enforcement mechanism here.
Well, Charles, I can say, I was talking about Councilmember Charles Allen called this building and its owners the absolute worst in the Washington Post.
All right, today paid subscribers get a bonus 4th roundup chat. We're going to talk about Vince Orange and Jack Evans, two very familiar names in DC politics, who a lot of people thought would never be running for office again and who are. If you want to be sure you always get the full episode, become a member. Head to membership.citycast.fm. It's only $10 a month, and members get ad-free listening, exclusive members events, and an extra events newsletter every week. Again, that's membership.citycast.fm. That is all for today here on CityCast DC. Our production team this week was Annie Reese, Julia Caron, and Ash Durbin. Newsletter editors Kayla Cote-Stemmerman, Adrian Gonzalez, and Natalia Aldana wrote our fabulous newsletter Hey DC this week. And our hosts are Bridget Todd and me, Michael Schaefer. Music is by Alex Roldan, with additional music from Philip Ayers from Triple Scoop Music via Getty Images. If you enjoyed the show, why not carve the words CityCast into the ice someplace near your house? We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Bye.